Good morning. So the second part of the lecture is yesterday we talked about least square estimation, and we saw how to solve classically this type of problems when we have evolution equations. And then we moved to Kalman estimator, and today I will present a second side of this type of problem that I call asymptotic observers. Observers is the other word for a sequential estimator. So for this kind of estimator where you try to estimate a long time. So the outline, so it will be shorter than yesterday, and we will have quite a lot of examples at the end with on application around the cardiovascular problems. I start again with my illustration. Okay, so this was the 4D-VAR estimation principle, and you remember, if you really the strong idea about Kalman is to understand that Kalman tries to find the dynamics of this guy. Okay, so it should be continuous in time, and for me it's impossible to have this type of animation continuously in time, so I do it like in a more discrete time version. But the idea was to generate this type of trajectory. Okay, and what we understood yesterday is that, so you have least square estimation. From that, you can compute the mean, which sometimes it's called the 4D-VAR approach, and then you have an equivalence with what we call optimal sequential estimator. Okay, the optimal sequential estimator in linear, it's Kalman, and in non-linear, it's called actually the Mortensen estimator, and I go quite quickly on it, but it's related to the HJB version resolution. And so really the important aspect of what I told you about yesterday was the fact that in one direct simulation, you get the exact estimate that you should have compute with the 4D-VAR. Okay? So you don't have to iterate anymore. The counterpart of that is that in order to compute this estimator, you need to compute either a Riccati or a HJB. Okay? So something which is very huge to compute numerically, and that's why for PDEs it's quite difficult to compute actually. And so I showed you two strategies for at least the Kalman part. The first one is to use this kind of H matrix, which is quite a new subject we are working on with Mathieu Ossal and François Allouge. Or you can define what we call reduced order strategy. So you project the solution of the Riccati equation over a smaller space in order to be able to compute it. And for the nonlinear case, I explained to you that since it's impossible to solve this HJB K, we use approximated Kalman strategy. And yesterday I told you that it was just an heuristic, and we will try to find a way to see why or maybe how it can be justified. So yeah, so these red curves is really the core, the spirit of Kalman. So if you So Kalman will give you something. So you have your target trajectory, you start from that, and target estimation. And if you have parameters, and you put them into your Kalman estimation, the target parameter should be that, and you start from that, and you will find something like that. You hope that you will find something like that. Okay, that's the spirit. Okay. Now, so my idea for this second lecture is to show you that actually we can change our point of view and say, let's forget about least square estimation, and let's try to understand the type of property that we can have, so that when you define an estimator, you converge asymptotically to the target solution. Okay, so I present you Kalman as the least square equivalent, but actually I could have presented it as a system who asymptotically converges to the right solution and the right parameters, and that is called asymptotic observers. Okay, all the systems that can have this type of behavior. So there is a like complete definition. I will pass quite quickly on the definition to interpret the two bullets here. Basically, the idea for an observer is that it should be causal, so it can use only the observation up to time t. It should be stable with respect to the perturbations. And the second aspect, basically, is that this type of behavior, so the asymptotic convergent, should be thought when you don't have any noise, okay? Because the noise will be a perturbation of that, okay? So what we say is that when you stop, if at some point you don't have any noise in your observation, you should converge. And if you are on the exact trajectory, you should stay on it, okay? So that's the two strong observation, okay? That's one. So for example, because it will be quite an important example, if I think back about my heat equation yesterday, I start from that, and the behavior of the heat equation was something like that, okay? So you get, at the end, you get something like that, for example. So you could think that 0 is an observer, okay? Actually, it's not true, because what I impose for defining an observer is that if I am on the good trajectory, I stay on it, okay? Okay, let's see how we can define these guys. And for that, basically, the idea is to compute the error between the target trajectory and the estimated trajectory. So you compute the error. I will write it like with a tilde. So y ch is the target trajectory, y hat is the estimator, and if you think of in the linear context, that was the dynamics in the linear context for the target one. For the estimator, basically the idea is to define a G, so a gain. For Kalman, you know that the gain will be given by P C star, but maybe we will be able to relax this choice. So you define a gain G, and then you subtract the two solutions, and you get that here. So you see that the dynamics of the error is is given by, so the operator of the dynamics of the error is given by A minus JC, okay? And these two terms correspond to the errors who actually feed the system, okay? So if you have some experience about stabilization problem, the idea is that maybe, so the question is, can we build a G, not necessarily the Kalman one, so that this system, this error, is exponentially stable to 0 when you have no noise, okay? And then when you have noise, you can control them, okay? And typically, if you have the stabilization for this part, then this part you will be able to control it by Grunwald inequalities, okay? If your G is not too bad, okay? So basically, that's the principle beyond constructing asymptotic observer. Okay, so Kalman is a choice, so you know already one. Okay, and I will show you that in some situation you can think of new ones that are simpler to compute, depending on the system that you are looking at. In a nonlinear context, here you will not be able to have something as nice as this, because then you have A of y and A of y church and A of y hat. So the error dynamics is no more autonomous, and basically the idea then is to linearize around 0 and to look at stabilization problem for nonlinear problems from a linearization point of view. Okay, so for the people who know the works from Coron, for example, they work a lot about a question like that. Yeah, and again, it's on the linearization that you will try to prove an exponential convergence, and then you will have that your system is an asymptotic observer as soon as the error at the beginning are small enough. Okay, and yeah, and Coron has also work on situation where you can prove actually that in the nonlinear case, without linearization, you can prove that the error will converge, but these are very strong results. Okay, in order to build this J guy, I will need to introduce some notion. The first one is what is an observable system. So an observable system is a system where if I give you two observations, then you get the same trajectory. Okay, and basically it means that in infinite dimension, it means that the care of the operator to be inverted is reduced to 0. You have to be careful in infinite dimension because care of this operator equal to 0 is not maybe what you want. Maybe what you want is a coercivity results more than just yeah, an injectivity result. And so in infinite dimension, it's called approximated observability when you have this result. Second definition is detectability. Detectability is really like the heat equation. Basically, it means that if you have the same solution, then you know that asymptotically your solution will converge to each other. Okay, so for the heat is already true because everyone is converging to 0. So okay, you have the detectability. Basically, the detectability is a little bit weaker. It means that you can observe the modes that are not controllable, that are not already stable. Okay, and yeah, and when I talk about yesterday, when I talk about Kalman, I did not introduce this type of notion. I just say Kalman is the least square is the equivalent of the least square estimator. But actually, if Kalman works, it's because you will have this type of property for your system. Okay? Otherwise, you will get something which is not convergent, so you will get a trajectory, but not necessarily the good one, as what you will get for the least square estimator, actually. So there are like ways to compute, to determine if the system is observable. So basically what people do is to compute what we call the Gramian of the system. So I'm in a linear case, phi is the semigroup associated, and from phi you take the observation, you take the adjoint, again the adjoint, and basically when you compute this guy over a given y, not a trajectory, a y that does not depend on t, any y in the state space, you see that this guy actually compute this. Okay, so basically Gramian coercivity and give you the coercivity for that. For autonomous system in finite dimension, it's equivalent to see if this is invertible and this is, and the so-called Kalman condition is given. So you see that in Kalman, so you introduce the rank of this matrix, and you have to see if the rank of this matrix corresponds to all the state space. Okay, if you want an intuition of why it's true, here, if you are in finite dimension autonomous, this guy is exponential of AT. Okay, so you want to know if something like integral over T is invertible. Okay, and then you remember that the exponential, because you have Cayley-Hamilton, you can look at power of only the power of a up to n. Okay, so n should be the same n, actually. Sorry, and so if you have that, then you can prove that this will be invertible. That's very. We will not use this criteria because it's very specific to finite dimension, but it's called the Kalman criterion. So I thought it was nice to recall what it is. And a last important result is what we call the Otus test. So basically the Otus test is very interesting because it's in finite dimension, you should be observable. So this should be invertible if for all modes of your system, if you look at C phi, where phi is the mode, if C phi equals 0 imply phi equals 0, then you are observable. So it means that if a mode cancels where you observe, okay, if it's true for all modes, then the system is observable. So it's okay to look at the observability through only the mode of the system. Actually, this test, which is very convenient in finite dimension, cannot be extended in all the cases in infinite dimension because in infinite dimension there is no reason that you have a complete basis of eigenmode to represent your operator. Okay, if it's symmetric, then maybe you can do it. If it's Q-symmetric also, but in the very general case, there is no reason to do that. Okay. Okay, so I will say the detectability, last definition detectability, I will say that it's detectable if I can define the G. That's exactly what I told you before. And from the detectability, I can define like the dual notion, which is stability. A system is stable and potentially exponentially stable if this operator is stable. So you see, in that case it's JC, in that case it's BG. Okay, so the operator is not on the same part. Okay, so now we have this definition. We can think of the Kalman estimator as an asymptotic observer. So let's look at the finite dimension linear case. So you compute this guy, and then you introduce a Lyapunov functional, which is exactly that. So y, so for all y, pi minus 1 is the Riccati, the solution of the Riccati equation, and you have to prove that actually pi is invertible. And then you compute this guy. And if you compute this guy and you derive through time, you will derive, so you derive through time this Lyapunov function apply to the error. Okay? So now the error depends of time. So you will have to derive the dynamics here and then to derive the dynamics here, okay, when you do the computation. And the magic of Kalman is that everything cancels and you can prove that actually you have this type of inequality, which is exactly the type of inequality proving that the system is actually contracting, okay? So basically, you have a Lyapunov function that allows you to prove that under the certain condition, you will have a contraction, and the two conditions that you need is actually to when you have this type of inequality, to finish the proof, what you have to prove is that actually this is basically a norm equivalent to this guy, to prove really the contraction. Yeah.
I remember something. Shouldn't the dissipation be
white tilde? Yeah, and there is a minus. Sorry. Yeah, thank you. A minus. And it's white tilde, okay? Sorry. So in order to be a contraction. And yeah, here it's and okay, but if you have just that, it's not enough. So you have to prove that you have like an equivalent norm, and the equivalent, to prove the equivalence of norm, you need the observability condition, okay? So it's only when you have the observability that actually you can prove that you will converge through time. The same exists in discrete time, and then you replace P of t by Pn, computed by the discrete time Kalman filter that I showed you. Then you can manage the errors, because in the previous slide I say no error. To manage the error, that it was done quite a long time ago by Kreiner. It's like just Lyapunov, just Grunwald inequality. In the nonlinear case, for the HGB case, you can do the same, but the Lyapunov function is a little bit more complicated and is related to the cost to come. Actually, that you compute with HGB. So you have to, yeah, and again, you prove that it's negative. And yeah, we can focus on these two last elements. The first one is that quite a long time ago, the people who decided to not use the HGB version, so the people who say this, sorry, that say that we cannot compute that, so they prefer here to use the heuristic, which is called the extended Kalman filter. What they decided to prove is that actually the extended Kalman filter will be an asymptotic observer when the error is not too big. So basically, if you look at Kalman as least square estimator, there is no way to justify the extended Kalman filter. But if you look at it as an asymptotic observer, then you can prove that actually, if the errors are small enough, then you will converge to the good trajectory. Okay, that was done by Kreiner in continuous time, discrete time before. Last but not least, we are working on this subject for quite a long time in infinite dimension with Karine Maufray. And what is difficult in infinite dimension is that actually you cannot define the dynamics of pi minus 1. So basically when you have like infinite dimension, you define the Lyapunov function like this. Okay, and then you will compute d over dt of y. Okay, so you will have because it's symmetric, and then you have to derive p minus 1, and p minus 1, there is no difficulty because it will be something like that. Okay, but that is okay when you can define when you can give a sense to the dynamic of pi minus 1. And yeah, sorry. Yeah. And the problem in infinite dimension is that it's not possible. So you have to work a lot to retrieve another way to compute this Lyapunov function in order to prove, but actually, yeah, it's also possible. It's more difficult, but it's also possible. Okay, yeah?
What would be, so pi is the kernel, it was the pi?
Pi is the operator. So pi is the operator. And it can be, in some cases, associated to a small pi, which is the kernel.
So formally, you would have to invert this.
Yeah, exactly. And it's only in some cases, because there is a lot of cases where I can't even prove that you have a kernel associated. The operator still exists, but it's not Hilbert-Schmidt anymore. Okay, so if I summarize what we know about Kalman from the asymptotic observer point of view, I use this diagram. So yesterday I talked about Kalman, and so if you are in a nonlinear case and you do error linearization, then you can prove that extended Kalman can work. Then you have the discrete extended Kalman, and the discrete extended Kalman is a time discretization of the continuous discrete Kalman. So you can prove stability, consistency, like in numerical analysis, classical numerical analysis possibility. The same for because you have because you have this stability consistency, then you will have it on the extended. The UKF version I talked to you about, where you replace the tangent by some kind of stencil computation, you can prove that when you do the error linearization, you get the same system. So if this guy converges, this guy will converge. Okay, no, I rephrase. If you can prove by error linearization that this guy converges, then this guy will also converge. Okay? So it's a way to justify this UKF. And then the RO means reduced order. So all the version where you decided to project on a small space, we have found a version for each. In particular, this one was not known. And you have also the same type of diagram. So you can do. So basically what it means is that typically when I see a system, I linearize, I look at the continuous time version, okay, and try to prove some stabilization property, and then I can rely on this guy to do the computation. Okay, that's the spirit. Okay, so let's try now to, so we understood Kalman, let's try to move and to find other type of J guys. Candidate. I will start with the first J candidate, which is very interesting to study, but actually as difficult to compute as the Kalman guy. And the idea is to find a J from not the time-dependent Riccati, but from the static Riccati equation. Okay? And the idea is that if you find pi, if you take this solution of pi, then by considering again pi C star, you will get a gain that is acceptable in terms of asymptotic observer as soon as you can prove that you are detectable and stabilizable. Okay, so basically you can rely on just this guy and you don't have the dynamics to compute for the gain. The problem is that it's as difficult to compute this guy as to compute the time-dependent solution. But it's quite interesting to know it because there is a very nice theorem in finite dimension, and which can be then extended to infinite dimension, is the pole shifting theorem. So the pole shifting theorem says that if AC satisfies the Kalman condition, so if AC is observable, then you can build a G such as for all monic polynomial, so a polynomial where you have the first coefficient is 1 on the strongest power. So for all monic polynomial, you can have this polynomial which correspond to the characteristic polynomial of the dynamics. Okay, so basically what this theorem means is that you can prove from an abstract point of view that if I give you a spectrum, like the spectrum we discussed a little bit about with Bertrand, so I give you a spectrum, there is a way to find a J that puts you all the modes on this spectrum, okay? All the eigenvalue. So basically, if you ask me for a stability, I can build a J that gives you exactly this stability, okay? And for that, I will show you not a proof, but like a practical example on how you can do it, okay? And you will see that from this practical idea, you can understand how to set the pole. Yeah, maybe I need to just to insist on what I mean by. So we will have several examples of that. So you have basically you have the pole of A. Okay, so the pole of A can be, for example, that. Okay, and basically the idea is that these are actually unstable poles. Basically the idea is that you can put that here on this part, and if so. The idea will be to do that, and then to have the pole, for example, and if the blue one are associated to JC, okay, this system is much more stable than the system, the pole of A, okay? That's the idea. So let's look on how it can work. So for that, I give you just very short example, which is a case where you have you can diagonalize the matrix. Okay, so finite dimension, you can diagonalize the matrix. Okay, so you have the pole somewhere for A, and I decided to. So here's the left and right eigenvectors, and basically I decided to I consider B. B transpose as something like that. So I will build B. I decided to build B so that B QB transpose is given by that. So one vector, so like a matrix of rank 1, okay, and this is a scalar coefficient. And if I decided to choose B like that, then I can search for the solution of the asymptotic Riccati equation on this form. And if I look it up on this form, and I write it exactly, everything simplified, and just have to find P1 with respect to Q1, okay? And it's given by this binomial equation. So you find P1, okay, where gamma 1 is given by this guy. So now, let's define mu as the eigenvalue of this guy. Okay, so lambda was the eigenvalue of this guy, and mu are the eigenvalues of this guy. If I compute, I will, this guy A minus JC is given by A minus P infinity C transpose. Okay, because I'm in finite dimension situation, so it's given by that, with the P1 that I have computed. If I is different from 1, I'll prove that actually the Wi are eigenvectors of this matrix with the same lambda I. So I prove that for every I different than 1, I didn't change the spectrum. But for the last one, so for the last one you project it over the Wi, you prove that actually for the last one, mu is changed, and you get lambda 1 minus P1 gamma 1. So you shift on the left lambda 1, and you can prove that actually you shift it, even if you have an unstable pole, you shift it on the left on the absolute value of the pole. So you go even further here, okay? So I show you in a very simple example how you can build this pi infinite, okay, with the asymptotic Riccati, where pole by pole, I will shift them to the good part, okay, because nothing is changed for the other part. So to complete the proof, you have to actually show that you can do it for example, a Jordan matrix, and then you have to, really the good point is that you shift one, but you don't move the other one, and then you can do recursively, okay, but you need to do it for all the versions, all the situation, not only a diagonalized matrix, but then you do it for Jordan version, etc., and you prove it that for every matrix you can shift on the left. Okay, and in infinite dimension, the spirit will be to do it only on the finite space and to let all the rest of the dynamics live like that, okay? And we will add condition for that, okay? So in infinite dimension, there is no equivalent, but what you can do is that project on a subspace, on the subspace, apply this type of strategy, and then let the rest of the system live, okay? Which means that the rest of the system that you actually let like that should be stable by itself, okay? So you need a detectability property, you need to prove that actually the rest is okay. But typically when you see a system like that, okay, what you want to do is to stabilize this part, but this one, if it's already very stable, maybe you don't have to touch it, okay? So that's the idea. So we did that for in the infinite dimensional case by saying let's do the reduced order Kalman strategy. So you project on the subspace, you write the equation of the reduced order, and then you do the analysis to say that on the subspace you can prove that you have moved the spectrum, and on the rest you will have the stability. Okay, I passed that, but that's the spirit. Okay? So this worked very well, but it works with the condition of detectability. Okay? So what you need when you do that is to be able to prove that actually the untouched modes are stable. So it means that there is a situation where you can't apply this type of results, which are all the situations where the system is conservative. Okay? In that case, the pole of a conservative system will be like that, for example, okay? And even if you decided to move this one of the left-hand side in order to stabilize the error system, you will have all the rest who stay there, and we are alimented by the noise. So, okay, they are fed by the noise. So this one will be actually unstable, and the instability will increase because you always have data with noises. Okay, so you will increase the noise. So basically, in the 70s, Luemberger decided to show that that basically we call Luemberger observer all the observer that can actually stabilize for all the modes. My idea is to show you how it works for the specific conservative system. So in the conservative system, the modes are here, like I said, and typically it's conservative because when A is Q adjoint, and when you compute the energy for the solution, you get 0. Okay, if you try to find a G so that the error is exponentially stable, the energy that you will retrieve is given by that, okay, because the A part cancel. Okay, so basically the idea is to prove that this guy is negative. So you want to find J in order to prove that this guy is negative. If I give you if I choose the specific situation where I choose pi, the pi to be identity, only identity, then I prove this, which already gives me that you will be negative because you see C star C this is like just a scalar coefficient somehow. Okay, so it will be directly negative. So it's very well known for quite a long time that actually, if you can prove the observability condition on that, then you will prove that this, okay, can be related to the norm on the initial condition, and then you will have again a Lyapunov function. Okay, but so in the specific situation of conservative system, you can prove by choosing J equal C star R, which is the simplest gain that you can imagine. Okay, so it really be equivalent to choose pi equal identity. With pi equal identity, if you have the observability condition, you will prove that actually you can shift all the modes, not only the first ones, all the modes on the left-hand side. Okay, and typically, so I try to do it to show you how it will behave. So typically what we will do is to say, let's say, let's choose something like that, with here a scalar coefficient, and see how the modes behave. Okay, and for that I give you one example. So I choose I will choose a 1D wave equation. Okay, so you have a 1D wave equation, and here, so here I have a Dirichlet condition, and here I put Neumann boundary condition. Okay, and I say, let's assume that you give me the observation of the end of the rope. Okay, so you have a rope, and I know only the last, where is the position of the last point of the rope. Okay, so if you choose that as an observation, so the position at, this is your observation. Okay, and you try to use that. Okay, so basically if you use that, you will see that you will try to control by a control which is at the end of the rope also. Okay, and now you play with gamma. Okay, so first all your poles are here. Okay, and you try to play with gamma. So what you could expect at first sight is that you get something like that. Okay, which could be nice. The problem is that if gamma tends to infinity, it means that here I will impose, by penalization, I will impose that actually U, for the error, that U is equal to 0. So for the error system, I will impose that actually to force the observation to be exactly that. So I will force Dirichlet boundary condition somehow. So I pass from purely Neumann to something which is purely Dirichlet by just forcing on gamma. Okay, and what is the spectrum for this system where you have Dirichlet boundary condition? The same, but you change the pole. Well, it depends on where you have the smallest one. Okay, so basically what you see is that you know that for gamma equals 0, you should be there, but for gamma equal infinity, you should be there. So you find something like that. The trajectory of the pole is something like that. Okay, so basically the idea is to find the gamma, which brings you here. But you can't be as on the left as you want. Okay, so the good point is that you choose identity, gamma identity, and it's okay, it will work. But you can't put the modes whatever you want. Okay? So when you do Kalman, basically, you choose, you can have all the stabilization that you want. So when you decided to choose for a stabilization, the only thing that you will take into account is the noise in your measurements. Because if you push too hard on the measurements, you will blow up the noise. Okay? But for this type of solution, you have a constraint, which is that you cannot force too much. Okay, so you have to understand the message here, which is basically for some physics there is way to avoid to compute the Kalman gain, But for this physics, you need first to prove that it can work, and second, you will have restriction on the choice that you can make for the gain. Okay? So let's know that we have a nice idea of that. Yeah, maybe since I'm there, I can just do a little digression and let's do the same idea but for a parabolic system. Okay? I told you for a conservative system I can choose just gamma C12. Okay, C star, sorry. Do you think it's possible for parabolic equation? So for that, we do the same, but now in 1D, we have the heat equation. Okay? If you compute the pole for the heat equation, what do you get? The poles are there. Okay, so the system is already stable. Okay? But basically the idea is to gain something, so to use the gain to increase the stability of the error so that your system will converge fast enough so that you can see something. Okay, otherwise it could have been good to choose 0. So now you play with gamma. Okay, same problem, Neumann. Okay, but you put gamma to infinity, you get Dirichlet. Okay, but Dirichlet, it will be there. And actually, it will be there, but very close to this guy. Okay, but depending of the physics, but okay. So what you will have is you move from there to there. Okay, so it works, but actually the gain is very small. Whereas here, you really benefit from a large gain here. Okay. So basically, you see a lot of people who do papers saying, I have found a very nice observer for a parabolic equation, I put just this, and it works pretty well. And they prove that actually the system is stable to 0 for the error, for sure. If you do nothing, it's already stable. Okay, but actually the gain is very small. So really the message is that it works for conservative system because of this behavior of the poles. Like practically it will work, but on the parabolic equation, it's better to use the Kalman approach, because the Kalman approach, what you will say is that you select only this one. This one is already sufficiently on the left, and this one, you will put them like that, but very on the left, okay? And you use the Kalman property to put them as far on the left as you can. Okay, so it's really like you really have to think of two ways of considering this type of system when they are conservative or dissipative. Okay, let's do some proof now of this observability condition. Okay, for the wave equation. So for the wave equation, this is the wave equation. I will write it in the first order form. So U is the field, V will be the time derivative of the field. And I will assume for now that I measure U dot, so the V actually. So U dot equal V in this, for example, in this small subdomain. Okay, so this is my domain, omega, and I observe in this small domain. So, and now I say I know that the observer should be that. Okay, let's look at what it gives you as a second order equation, and you get that. Okay, and this equation is very well known for people who do control theory, because basically what it says is that if you measure the velocity, what you should do is to take the velocity. Oh, sorry, I meet the hat here. Here, so here you have hat, hat, hat. So if I measure the velocity, my estimator should be based on the difference between the velocity that I measure and the velocity that I can compute. And if I see a difference, I put some kind of force, that will be again that have the good sign in order to counteract on the error measurement. Okay, so the spirit of that is how to teach to swing to your kids. Basically, when you, okay, so they swing, okay, at the beginning they don't know how to do it, so you push, okay, and then you want to stop. So basically, how do you stop? When you see that they are coming to you, you push in the counter sense in order to go against the velocity. Okay, and that in very few iterations, you stabilize to 0. That's exactly the same spirit. So now let's see if the system is detectable. So basically that you have the property, some property for the pole. The idea is to prove that every pole that cancel on the small omega should be actually 0. So it's like given by Holmgren theorem. For people who are interested, there is the course of Burke and Gérard that you can find on Nicolas Burke's webpage where they really developed this type of ideas. And if you want to go a little bit further and consider the observability, so if the Gramian is invertible, then you need to find this property. So the property says here that what you have on the measurement, okay, is coercive with respect to the initial condition. So it's exactly C phi of the initial condition. So you get here the measurements, and you have to prove that actually this guy is coercive. And I don't know if you know this type of results, but it's linked to what we call the geometric control condition. Okay, the idea is to be able to prove that every ray from optical geometry enter this zone. Okay, for a time t. If every rays enter this zone, then you will have the observability. Actually, in my example, it's not the case, because I have one ray here that stays here, okay? But for some other domains, you can prove that, and then you will have the observability condition. So it's very nice that you, for a question of observation, you are able to relate your observation problem as a control problem, okay, which is well studied by the community. We did the same for when you measure not the derivative of the field, but the field itself. And then it's a little bit more complicated because C star should be understood in H1 somehow, because here it's H1, and so you find this system. So now you do not control as a force. Okay, it's not like it's not like you are controlling by putting a force that use the discrepancy. You control the first equation. Okay, so again hat. You have hat here, and so basically in the observer equation, what you are trying to say is that the derivative of the velocity, it's not the velocity anymore. It's the velocity plus a control term. And when you use that, you can prove that you have the same type of results, and we prove that it's related to a slightly different observability condition, where here you have the gradient of u, okay? And basically you have an energy equivalence in the wave equation saying that the gradient of u is pretty much contain the same type of information that dt of u. So you prove then that under the same geometric control condition, you will have these results. Okay. What is very nice when you see observability condition is that observability condition is a condition for somehow injectivity of the inverse problem. Okay. So basically, the injectivity condition says that either you should give me the velocity, or if you give me a displacement, it should be h1. Okay. And in practice, you will never have a h1. Okay. So it will mean that actually you will have a problem of surjectivity. Because you will give me a measure in L2 and I need a H1, okay? So you have to, somehow, it's a way, when you study this type of geometric control condition, you understand the regularity that you need for the system to be invertible, so to not be a Hill-Pose problem anymore. And so you understand the situation where you will have a Hill-Pose problem.
Can you go back one slide before?
Yeah.
So what is the derivative in the last?
dt, yeah, sorry, dt, ouais. Excuse me, yeah, dt, ouais. Exactly. In fact, you get this equation from this one. You compute the error, you get u tilde, u tilde, u tilde, you kill this guy, and then you prove that you compute the energy. This energy will be, this part will give you a conservative term that will give you the time t and time 0, and this guy is the integral of that. Okay, so yeah, gamma is conditioned by the overdamping phenomena, so you cannot put gamma 2, you can have a too strong method. Reduced order method does not work in this situation because I really need to put on the left all the modes, basically, and not only the first ones. Okay. Since I decided to not use the Kalman filter, I have to prove that I can rebuild the initial condition if you ask me to. Okay, and so there is a very nice algorithm that I've been quite studied by Karim Ramdani, where what you do is you do the observer forward, and then you use the fact that for the wave equation you can reverse time, and you write the same observer backward in time. So you use the fact that you have a skew adjoint operator, so you can do back and forth in time in order to find. And I will show you an example for that. You can even prove that it works with unbounded domain equation, meaning wave equation on unbounded domain. We work a lot on that, and then the geometric control condition is changed by the geometric control condition in exterior domain. And you can also prove that it works for elastodynamic problem using the result from people who have worked on the geometric control condition for elasticity. For example, Damon Bella-Swed and co-authors. And what is nice is to understand what will happen for elasticity. So this is for the wave equation, okay? You have the ray, the geometric optical ray, and basically the geometrical optical ray are the support of the information, okay? That's the principle behind the microlocal analysis. It supports the information, and basically you prove that this information enters the control zone so that the system is observable, okay? How it works for the elasticity situation, it's the same, but in elasticity, you don't have only one optical ray, you have S ray and P ray, which mean pressure waves and shear waves for elasticity. Okay, and so this result exists only for the Dirichlet condition. Okay, the control results exist only for domain where you have the Dirichlet boundary condition on the boundary. Okay, it's an open question for a Neumann situation. But if you have a Dirichlet boundary condition, the idea is that you have a S wave, so S ray, and the S ray is decoupled from the P ray because you can prove that S wave and P wave are uncoupled until the boundary. And when you reach the boundary, you generate the S ray and the P ray. And then you hit another boundary and you generate the S ray and the P ray. And the result is that all the combination of S and P should enter the zone so that you have the observability condition. Okay? So it's really a very nice way to understand how you will have to design where you observe to control something. Okay? Okay, examples. So it's an example in unbounded domain. So you have like, it's Neumann here, and here it's a transparent boundary condition. Okay, in that case we are able to design transparent boundary condition. Okay, this is the direct problem with an initial condition here, and I will say that I observe in this zone, quite a strong zone, because I observe quite everywhere, but not in the center. Okay? And this will be the observer starting from a completely wrong initial condition. Okay? I start from the Gaussian here. Okay? So true solution, the target one, the wrong one. Okay? And you observe from that. and you see appearing, you see that something is appearing, okay? But everything, again, as yesterday, everything is outside, so I have to reverse in time. And if I reverse in time and I reuse the observation, after one iteration, so one forward, one backward, I get that. And then, so one iteration, two iteration, three iteration, 4, 5. Okay? So I'm not as good as Kalman, because in Kalman, in one iteration, I can rebuild everything. In that case, I need 5 iterations to rebuild the initial condition. But it works pretty well. Okay? And this observer is pretty much as cheap as the direct simulation, because you don't have any Riccati to solve. It's like super easy to implement. Okay? Discretization. So you discretize your system, your wave equation, for example, and you say, okay, if I have a simple discretization for my wave equation, I will use the same type of discretization for the control term, so for this guy. And basically, your first idea, it will work. So for example, I use midpoint scheme because I know that midpoint scheme are conservative, and then I define as a midpoint correction for this guy. I compute the energy balance at the discrete level, and I find the energy, the same type of energy balance as I found for the continuous problem. And so basically I know that if I have the observability condition, my system will be observable, okay? And so the question is like, if it's true in the continuous framework, it should be true here, okay? And actually it's not. That's the pity of all this stuff, and it gives a lot of work of all the community. For example, like Zwazwa has made a lot of work on that. Okay, there is really a difficulty when you discretize this type of control system. And it is due to the fact that when you discretize this type of system, actually all the modes are here, but the top modes here, so the high frequency, are not physical anymore. They just correspond to the discretization. Okay, typically the last mode correspond, if in 1D, the last mode correspond to switching from 1 to -1 at every node of your system. Okay, so it's only related to the discretization. And actually, this term will control all the modes, but not the non-physical ones. So you always kept modes that are glue. They are not exactly on 0, but they can be as close to 0 as possible when you put H, when you increase the discretization in delta T or in H. You have the same phenomena. So basically the idea is to develop methods to avoid that. So for that you need either there is way when you can use finite mixed element method in order to retrieve something. We use numerical viscosity to avoid that. And there is people who also do a mesh adaptation in order to change the mesh in order to not have this type of frequency. Basically, the idea is that on the discrete level, you will try to curve the spectrum like this with a little bit of viscosity in order to not have this high frequency that pollute your estimation. In that case, what we have proved is a quite nice result is that if you use this type of scheme and the data, you can prove that actually you get better numerical analysis estimate than when you do nothing. So basically, I don't know if you remember that, but when you do the numerical analysis for a wave equation, for example, you prove that actually it converges, but actually the constant depends on the time of the simulation. So if you do with like students, you do a 1D simulation for the wave equation and wait a time long enough, you will see that actually you are completely unphased with the real solution. Okay, because if for a long time the estimation is the constant depend of time. If you decided to use the data, okay, so you have supplementary information, then the numerical analysis gives you a constant that does not depend of time anymore. So somehow you prove that by using the observation, you can do better numerical analysis. So basically the message is that if in any situation you have observation, you should use them because it's always better than doing the direct simulation. Okay, even for numerical analysis.
Just to make sure, so that you have to suppose that the model is good and the error is uniformly bounded.
Yeah.
Just you can control that.
Yeah. Okay, few remarks quite quickly. How do you do when the observations are not given at every time of your simulation? Okay, so what we call time sampling of the data. Okay, you have. So here we were able to do so basically you have two choices when you have something like that. First choice, you use the data when you have them, and in between you do the direct model without using the data. Second approach, you interpolate the data in time, okay, so that you can use the data, you can use interpolated data every time, okay? And the message is very simple. If you use the data only when you have them, okay, you do not introduce any error because you use the data only when they are available. But you can lose some stability because between two data, you have your dynamics, which is conservative, okay? So maybe you will get far from the solution, and then when you use the new data, you will be too far. If you try to interpolate the data in order to use the stability at every time step, the problem is that you introduce a consistency error due to the fact that you are interpolating the data. Okay, and actually you can do the numerical analysis in the two cases, and basically you prove that depending of where is your data, the sampling period and the amount of noise that you have in your data, maybe one choice is better than the other one. Okay, same thing for space sampling. So, okay, so it's again you will see why I'm showing this very specific domain in a minute. So basically, you said that you have measurement on this domain on this very coarse grid, and you increase the size of the grid in order to have more and more data. Okay, so it's a full observation problem. You observe everywhere, but with a sampling of size h. And basically, you can prove that. So this is the mode of the this is the mode of the continuous problem. So you're since you observe everywhere, it's like very on the left, okay? And this is the mode for H, which is H, and this is the mode for the uncontrolled problem, okay? So uncontrolled problem, then I control the problem, I get this spectrum. And then this in green, this is the mode for the observation where H is going to 0. And you see that if I don't have a small enough H, I cannot recover the exact same behavior than for the continuous problem, okay? So again, it's completely consistent with the fact that the sampling of the data will impact the quality of the estimation, okay? So sampling of the data in time and in space impact, okay, the estimation. Okay, so this is for wave equations or wave-like equations. Do we know other type of Luemberger system? Yeah, it works also for transport equation. So I could have show you the same type of result for the depolymerization example. I want you to show you one example that we did with Jacques Sainte-Marie, Benoît Pertam, and Céline Boulanger. Basically, the idea is can we find an observer for the Saint-Venant system? Okay, and a specific situation where what you measure is the actually, yeah, sorry, it's wrong. The observation is not U, it's H. Okay, so you measure the height of the system. Okay, so sorry, it's not U, H, and we propose this observer. Okay, so again, a scalar coefficient correction and a correction here. And what is original somehow is that we also have a correction here, and this correction is nonlinear. So it's gamma U hat and then the discrepancy between the height. Okay? In the literature, we found that actually there are people who are using the same, an observer like that with here 0. And actually, the observer is known to be not very efficient. And basically, by just changing that, we get very nice result. I will show you. How we do we imagine or build this observer? The idea is that when we start from the kinetic version of this, and on the kinetic version, since it's linear, in the sense that the left-hand side is like linear, we decided to use that. And then we rewrote the moment associated to the kinetic energy and find that actually we should have a term here. So it's really nice to change the equation to think about the physics differently and then to build something, and then you redo the computation in order to get your observer in the space that you want. Okay, let's show how it works. So this is a test case. You like have a glass of champagne. Okay, the observation is that the champagne will move like that. So it's like the end of your evening yesterday, we start by believing that actually you were in perfect shape and that your champagne glass should be like that, okay? So my observer will start with this initial condition, okay? So if I do nothing, my solution from this starting condition should be 0. So it should stay like that. No velocity, only height, okay? But I have observation of the height of this guy. Okay, and the observer give me that. Okay, by just the 2 control here, you are able to recover. Okay, again. So asymptotically, that's the spirit of asymptotic observers. Okay. Yeah. 20 minutes left. No. Yeah. So parameter estimation using the same type of ID. In the linear case, basically the idea is to say, I will use the gain that I have built for the parabolic case or for the wave equation case, and then I will complement by a reduced order strategy only on the parameter space. And you get a very nice algorithm that we develop, and you can prove quite a lot of things on this system. So basically, in order to prove that this estimator, which combine, so Luenberger for the state, reduced order Kalman for the parameters, what you do is that, again, you compute the error of the system. You do a quite a nice change of variable, and you find that the error is related to this system. Okay, so if this system goes to 0, then it proves that my estimator is good. And what you see is that when you do the change of variable, you get on the mu variable, you get only the dynamics that you were studying just before. So if you have in the wave, for the wave equation case, if you have the geometric control condition, this should go to 0. So this will go to 0. And then you just have this guy, and you can prove that this guy goes to 0 as soon as you have an observability condition for the parameter, which is called an identifiability condition. So this is for the linear case. So it's like theta enter the system as like in the right-hand side, so very specific parameter situation. Then you can do for the nonlinear situation, and you extend everything by using the extended Kalman filter for the parameters. And then you get this error, you linearize the error, and you prove. So you combine all the techniques that I've showed you for like 2 hours now to prove that it works. And you can do the UKF version of that. And basically the UKF version of that say at every time you launch, you generate parameters, you launch the simulation for 1 time step, you combine the information, compute the Kalman gain only on the parameter space, okay, correct, and then do it again every time step, okay. What is important is really to understand that depending on your system, it's really important to not forget to have a gain on the state. Okay? You see a lot of people who do estimation only for parameters. So they only do identification problems. Okay? They can even prove that the identification problem is well posed. But actually, when they do that, they always assume that they know perfectly the initial condition, which is never the case. Okay? So when in practice you are doing the job, okay, if you have like a dissipative system, there is no problem because the error on the initial condition will actually decrease by itself. If you use that for a conservative system, since the conservative system is conservative, you prove that actually if you put G equals 0 here, you have mu equal A mu, and this error cannot go to 0. Okay? And actually it will even blow up because you may have noise that enter the system. Okay? So it's super important to understand that when you do identification, it's always a good idea to also take advantage of the data in order to control the state also. Okay? So that's basically the algorithm. Okay. Okay. This is only, now it's just example. Like quite a simple example. So it's like so this is the domain. You will see why I'm looking at such domain, and I am looking for an elasticity problem here where I try to infer parameters. Sorry, yeah, maybe it's not the good slide. Yeah, let's start with this one, sorry. So, yeah, so this is the direct problem, something like that. It will look like a heart in like 2 minutes. And you try to identify some parameter on the right-hand side, okay? So I decided to have like 17 regions in my domain, and I decided to infer one parameter in each region, okay? I start from every1 equal to 1, and I generate observation where in one region, the 14th one, I have put the parameter to 0.5, okay? And I generate observation on this, which are only observation corresponding to the displacement on this actually the velocity on the sub-region like that. And then I redo the estimation, everyone starting from 1, and what I see is that when like the activation is actually activating the zone, slack, you find a good parameter. Okay, in one direct simulation, you find a good parameter. Yeah. The same, but then I infer a parameter in here, like a Young modulus parameter. Same problem. What is important to see is that how I parameterize the parameter here. So I want to find the Young modulus, so like a coefficient just in front of the Laplacian. Okay? So this coefficient should be positive. Okay? So if you decide to do an estimation on this parameter and you write it just like theta, you will have an estimation that can give you negative values, which is not good because then the problem is unstable, okay, even from a simulation point of view. So basically what we do is that since we have algorithm that works for nonlinear situation, we reparameterize the parameter to write it like that, 2 power of theta. But then theta, if theta is between minus infinity to plus infinity, this guy will always be positive. And then, again, even if the problem is nonlinear, you can reach the good value of the parameter. Okay, so that was the two first test cases. Okay, so let's move now to real examples. And yeah, the same problem, but with a real geometry. Okay, it looks like the same type of problem, but for the real heart. So I don't know if you are used to see a heart beating. So this is a heart, okay, like cut like that. Okay, cut like that. And the physics of the heart basically says that you have like an electrical activation Okay, in color here, I will give you quickly the equation associated to that. And so you have this activation, and when you have this electrical activation that pass through the tissue contracts. Okay, for those who are not used to physiology, basically you put your 2 fingers in a plug, and then your muscle contracts. So it's exactly the same spirit. Okay, but for the heart, it's normal, and it's every second. Okay. And then, if you have fluid in the cavity, and Jean-Frédéric will show you an example of that, the fluid which is in the cavity is sent to the external circulation to feed the human body from oxygenated blood. Okay? So on that, we develop with lots of colleagues between the 2 teams at INRIA, REO, and Medisim, different models. So for the solid part, basically the idea is to rely on nonlinear elasticity formulation. So I will not develop the detail of that, where actually we use some multi-scale analysis in order to take into account the fact that the heart is contracting because you have like the cells have a specific behavior where you have actin and myosin heads who attach themselves. So we build quite a complete nonlinear model to represent the contraction of the muscle from an input, which is the electrical activation. So nonlinear, basically nonlinear elasticity. For the electrical activation, what we use is the bidomain equations, okay, again, and for example, also you get the results of the bidomain equations, and in the Jean-Frédéric's team, they also, from this bidomain equation, they can even compute ECG for the system. And okay, and the last physics I will talk to you about is fluid structure interaction, so explained by Jean-Frédéric yesterday, but I will be quick on that. So basically I will show you one example. Okay, so 3 types of physics. So solid mechanics, fluid mechanics, electrophysiology. And on the heart, you have plenty of measurements. Okay, this is a cine MRI where you see the heart, so the cut is like that, basically, and you see the heart contracting. This is the same type of images, but you see here a grid. Do you see it? This grid is like a magnetic grid, so it's called a tagged MRI. Basically, they impose a magnetic grid and then they follow the magnetic grid over time. So basically, it's very nice because you see the image in 3D. You even see the material points that are moving. Okay, so that's like the gold measurements, okay, where you actually really see displacement. Here, it's like what they call phases MRI, where they have this type of image where they try to measure flows. And okay, these are all MRI, but you can also do echography or CT. So this is a CT image of the aorta, which is moving. And what is important, so my message for the last example is that when you try to, okay, so you do all this work and then you say, okay, let's try to do that with real data. Okay? And basically, the only case that we were able to work with at the beginning was this guy. Because then you have the displacement and it corresponds exactly to what I have explained you. Okay? I measure the field in a subdomain. Okay, so then you go to the medical doctors and you say, so it was in 2008, so this image is from 2018. Okay, so in 2008, when you ask for a medical doctor, does it work, the tagged MRI? They say, yes, sure. So can you give me one? And they say, no, I can't. Because actually there were always problems to get data, to have the 3D reconstruction, etc. So in practice, for like 10 years that I'm working on, I was never able to use this type of data. Okay, so what we did is to try to use this data, or at least if we have tag, to use the 2D tag and not 3D tag. But if you have 2D tags, you have problems because the heart is moving across the planes, so you don't see the displacement. You see something which is a projected displacement, okay? So for all these reasons, we faced new challenges which are based on the shape observations situation. So basically, what do you do if I said that the observation are only the green contour here that medical doctors have drawn from the MRI? Okay, so this is the measurement that he gave you. So basically, this green contour corresponds to seeing this for the heart. Okay, and I said this is my observation. So my observation is a surface. It's not a displacement anymore. It's a surface that is moving. And on this surface, you have no ways to follow the points, the material points. So you have no way to rebuild a displacement, even a displacement on the boundary. Okay, because there is no way to see that one point is going somewhere. So you see only the shape. And basically, we work quite a lot to prove that actually, so all my J stuff using this instead of that was made for that. To prove that actually maybe when you have surfaces, there is no way to subtract two surfaces, okay? It's like it's not a vectorial space. So basically the idea is to invent distances, new space where you can define a discrepancy, and this discrepancy will be strongly nonlinear and not related to like a vectorial space representation. Okay, so for example, we use distances between surfaces, and then from the distances we compute. Basically, the idea to find a correction that is based on the gradient of J in order to find the C star. The corresponding C star, because if you see here, if you compute the gradient of J with respect to Y, you get the C star. So basically, in the nonlinear case, you replace by that, and you keep the correction the same way that I teach you about for the wave equation. Same in 2D. So the 2D waves, the 2D tag. So these are the tags. Yeah. So the tags are moving like that, and you can rebuild the plane associated to this tag. Okay, and basically the idea is to compute the distance between these planes and these planes. Okay, and you use it as discipline. What is nice is that you can prove that when you linearize everything, if by any chance you have all the planes, then you will recover on the linearized situation the displacement. Okay, so that's the idea. And now we have all the tools to do real data situation. So I will show you an experiment, okay? So there is no bad picture on it. It's a pig experiment, so the pig died. Okay, so for the people who are not used to, it's the only case I have with a real experiment, and I worked for 10 years on it. So with one pig, I worked for 10 years. Actually, maybe 20. Okay. All the so yeah. So this is the pig heart. So the experiment was that the pig was in perfect health. And we did an MRI of this heart. And from this MRI, we build a mesh and calibrate a model. Okay? So this is the heart of the pig projected into the MRI. Okay? So it seems to be quite correct. Maybe you will see, yeah, here. Okay? So these contours are the model contours. Okay? The simulation contours. Okay? And it seems to be pretty nice. Then we generate on a pig an infarct. Okay, so basically the pig got sick and his heart has a zone where the contraction does not occur anymore. Okay, because it's infarcted. If I take the same model, so the model of the healthy pig, and I project it into the data of the infarcted, peak. So in green, it's the infarcted data, okay? And in yellow, it's the direct simulation. And you see now a huge difference here, because it seems to not move, because there is an infarct. When you saw that to a medical doctor, he says, you put 10 years of your life trying to show me that you have an infarct here, and when I see it directly, okay? But anyway. And now this is the estimator. So in purple, it's the estimator that during time adapt to the green data, and in the same time uses the same type of zone that I showed you on the ellipsoid and try to recover one parameter in each zone. This parameter is what we call the contractility, so meaning the capacity of the model to be activated by the electrical activation. Okay, so when you have an infarct, you know that even if you have an electrical activation, you will not contract anymore. And you see that actually in all the zones here, the parameter drop. Okay, so somehow we were able to prove that actually we can do identification of parameters for this type of situation and recover where is the infarct, okay? And more, we can even quantify the level of infarct, okay? If it's a strong one or maybe a small one, etc. So then comes the not nice moment where you compare to reality, okay? So that's why we need an experiment. So it's like with another type of imaging modality, they recovered that the infarct was there. And I found the infarct basically here. So I was very good there and not good at all there, okay? That's exactly what is not cheating with an inverse problem, okay? You inverse data and then you compare to data that you do not use to inverse the data, okay? And then you see that you are wrong, okay? Because it's life and you are always wrong. And then you try to understand why you are wrong on this part. And the problem is that actually here, since we are just trying to simulate the heart, we need to put some artificial boundary condition in order for the heart to not actually fall down. Okay, so we have boundary condition, and the real heart here actually is not like, it's a little bit sleeping on the boundary condition, and we were not, we did not use at that time sliding boundary condition. So for us, the heart is already attached here quite strongly. Okay, so there is no need for the model to drop the parameters because the model does not move too much here. So we say, yeah, I can keep the good parameter. For me, it's okay. Okay. So it's very nice. Then at the end, when you study the error, you can find where you should improve your model. Okay. I passed the example on the fluid structure interaction, and I just want to finish. So we did the same for the. Maybe Jean-Frédéric, you will show the. You will show this one. Yeah. And okay. And I want just to finish like 2 minutes on. Problem in electrophysiology, again with shape measurements. So when the people like in Bordeaux, what they do is that so this is an atria, so part of the heart, and they have they put like they put a vest on you, and they try to recover the electrical activation. So very strong, ill-posed inverse problem. Okay, and I just passed the first part. They try to recover time of activation on the heart surface. Okay, so I will not discuss this inverse problem. It ill pose. Okay, but basically they end up by post-processing the signal to this type of maps where you see the time activation. So it says that in this zone, the activation has passed at time t given by this color. So you have a correspondence between having this isochrone and having data which is a front. So basically, to have that on a static image corresponds to have this data in a dynamical situation. Okay? So for the real data, yeah. You see? Okay, the question is how do you use that? How do you use information like that? Again, it's a shape because your solution, yeah, and actually you even have point where you don't have the map, okay? But your solution, it's like the solution of a reaction diffusion problem, and you will have to compare to something which is like 1 somewhere, 0 somewhere. Okay, so it's really like a shape. And in order to do that, we decided, and maybe Annabelle Collin will present you that in more details on Monday. We decided to find a way to compare, again, to compare data which are like in a very bizarre space to the solution. And we use what people do in image processing with the Mumford-Shah functional. So the idea is to use a J, which is given by people who are doing image processing. And so basically the Mumford-Shah functional allows to do that on the plane. It allows to do that. So basically it's like a correction term when you minimize this functional over that, starting from the initial condition, which is a square, you find the shape. Okay? So we thought it was a nice tool to build a Weinberger for the reaction diffusion situation. And so we from this functional, we decided to compute the gradient of the previous functional with respect to the state. So in order to compute such a gradient of a shape, you need shape derivative or topological derivative. So we combine shape derivative and topological derivative to actually define an observer. So again, you have your target system, you have just one very nice correction with like complicated term, but computed from derivatives of the criteria. And then you prove, and then you do the work to prove that actually it can stabilize. And we were able to prove that for small error, actually it's a dissipative term as soon as we have enough contrast in the data. And the contrast problem is related to this type of problem in image processing. Okay, so this, you see it, so your contour will be okay. And the banana, you don't see it, so you don't have the contour, okay? And you will see that it works pretty well. So basically the idea, okay, so you start from a wrong initial condition, and the observer, yep, pursue the good trajectory. And when you have the topological term, yeah, you create a new front in order to do that. How it works for the atria, you start from the wrong initial condition. This is the target solution, and you will see that the solution will accelerate to pursue this guy. And in the same time, you do the parameter estimation. So this is done with synthetic data. On synthetic data, we were also able to retrieve some very strong pattern by using the topological term. So you can even pursue like a fibrillation, and then we did that for the real data, not the parameter for the moment, but for the real data, it allows you to complete the data. It's a nice way you can use the observer to then regenerate the complete data everywhere. We were actually working on the fact that when you don't have the data somewhere, maybe you can modify a little bit the term. So this is the target. And since you don't have the data here, sometimes you don't use, you cannot use anything, so you are not able to pull on this part. But if you change a little bit the term by using some gradient with respect to more clever norms, then you are able to recover. We did that for fire propagation, and it's a result that we did in the SEMRAX 2016. So SEMRAX is nice. And sorry, I don't have the video. Yeah, you will see the video afterwards. Yeah, it's sorry. Yeah. Okay. So, and I'm surprised that yeah, it's not starting. Sorry. And basically, our idea is not to maybe to develop the same type of SD to follow, for example, blood cells or to follow a chemotaxis phenomena, where you try to follow the form of the chemotaxis. Okay, conclusion. It works. So you can do observers to do estimation. And the message is that the work we have done for the fluid structure orientation that Jean-Frédéric will talk about, one direct simulation take 1 day. Okay? So if you decided to do the 4D VAR strategy, you can, but then you have to work. Because if you do like 50 iterations of your 4D VAR, okay, you get 50 days of estimation. Okay? What I try to show you is that there is a way to work on the PDEs in order to build new observer that actually in only one situation give you the good result. Okay, so basically for the work that we have done with Jean-Frédéric, it's like in 1.5 days we get the results instead of 1 day. And for that, basically I summarize the challenges that we have to face off. It's that for every type of measurements that you have to design this gain operator, what is also called feedback operator. Then you have to analyze that the observer can work. You have to prove that you can also do parameter estimation. Okay, so you may face identification problem. You need to prove that you can discretize everything and you are not putting new errors when you discretize, and then that you are able to apply to real data. What we are working on now is like the question is, what are the theoretical aspects behind nonlinear system in infinite dimension? What are the proof that we can have on the shape? Can we take into account some constraint on the system, so which is very important? Like you want a divergence-free state, you want a parameter that stay into two zones. That's super important and quite difficult actually, but we have we are working on that now. Can we do the estimation error like in every situation? And the last but not least, can you combine this idea when you have data on a population in order to do estimation on the complete population, which is related to the last question of yesterday, combining data assimilation and statistical learning. And sorry for the today.